and security of the nation, the name of politics must stop. As the NBC celebrates what is a milestone, a quarter of a century in its existence, I urge the Commission to redouble its efforts in discharging its mandate. The NBC must ensure a strict adherence to the broadcasting code, and airline stations must be sanctioned accordingly to serve as a deterrent.
A grand rally in support of President Muhammadu Buhari's administration and safe return from medical vacation has been held in Kano. Organized under the auspices of the Conference of Patriotic Nigerians, Mohammed Rabiu Ali reports that 2 Rakat prayers were also observed for the speedy recovery of the president.
For those who don't wish Nigeria well, we would like to inform them Buhari is in Nigeria.
We are here to show to the world that we are Kano. We brought Buhari here with almost 2 million votes. Therefore, after 2 years, we justify our position that we are with Mr. President.
The senior special advisor to the president on Niger Delta Affairs, Brigadier General Paul Boro, retired, is seeking a strategic partnership with the Nigerian Television Authority. The senior special advisor to the president and his team paid a courtesy call on the Director General of the NTA.
A lot of the young people that have particularly been trained in various educational institutions around the world, we would not have known the capacity and the capability of those young men.
And I think it's a positive move for youths who bear arms, willing, to disarm and get involved in a program that they feel will transform them positively.
And our last story, sadly, one instructor has died in a Nigerian Air Force air beetle crash in Kaduna while on a mission. The Air Force, in a statement by the Director of Public Relations and Information, Air Commodore Olatokunbo Adesonya, indicates that a board of inquiry be constituted to determine the immediate and remote causes of the crash. The Chief of Air Staff commiserates with the family of the late pilot. And that's the news. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kieran and Kingsley after the break. Good morning.
Hate speech is not a joke. It incites genocide and crimes against humanity. Most of Africa's civil wars are caused by hate speech from one tribe against another. We don't want it here. The Nigerian government stands firm against hate speech.
I was distressed to notice that some of the comments, especially in the social media, have crossed our national red lines by daring to question our collective existence as a nation. This is a step too far.
One nation bound in freedom, peace and unity.
Nigeria, one nation, one people.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
I can see a lot of signals here. Are you Vuz Almighty? Okay. Are you Mr. Lover? No. Okay. Are you Mega Connect? Okay. Are you click and die?
Introducing Airtel Unlimited Data Plans. Get Unlimited 10 for 10,000 Naira. Get Unlimited 15 for 15,000 Naira. And Unlimited 20 for 20,000 Naira. Unlimited data. Unlimited you.
Airtel, the smartphone network.
And now,
federal government to ingest a total of 60 billion naira into rural communities across the country as the African Export-Import Bank floats $300 million depository receipts in equities investment. Kolo Mohammed tells us more on Business News.
Hello and many thanks for joining us on Business News. The federal government says plans have been completed to ingest 60 billion naira into the lives of rural community dwellers across Nigeria over the next 1 year. The funds, tagged Cash Plus, aim to meet immediate needs of poor of the poorest and further enable them to be able to afford domestic assets and also service everyday life uplifting indicators by which living standards are measured.
You can imagine that by May next year, God willing, the 60 billion would have been in the rural economy, within the rural areas, with different businesses, petty trading, the farmer, processing, and we're going to place a lot of emphasis on the value chain, the agricultural value chain in the different states, what is the predominant crop for the rural households, and then help them to work along the value chain, and then in semi-urban areas where there are non-farm activities, then we focus on that. And even in some rural areas, we know that some states that the rural economy is not strictly agriculture. We will also look at those other ones. Whatever the rural household is familiar with, we don't want to take them outside what they are comfortable with.
When fully in place, more value will be added to their environments and mass movement out of rural communities to urban centers will be minimized.
You know, a lot of this child trafficking also is as a result of poverty. If parents in rural areas have things they are doing and they are engaging their children, then the issues of child trafficking, sending your child to urban areas for labor, child labor, all those, although will reduce, but at least the child labor will now be within the household.
More states are expected to key into the program. Trading on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange ended Thursday on a bearish note, with all share index shedding 1.30% to close at 36,575.86 basis points. Time now to see a summary of how trading went down. The African Export-Import Bank has floated a $300 million depository receipt coming as equities investment. The investment instrument, which is open to global investors, will be issued through the Stock Exchange of Mauritius. At a press conference in Lagos, officials of the African Export-Import Bank revealed that any African investor qualifies to participate in the investment vehicle with $30,000 stake. Africa's Export-Import Bank is pooling the funds to be able to fund African trade, investments, and infrastructure. The investment has the backing of African Development Bank and the State Bank of Mauritius. Africa's Export-Import Bank managers say that the investment is tax-free. The bank was created in the early 80s by African governments in response to demand for efficient trade funding and continental development. And that's it on Business News. Good Morning Nigeria continues shortly. Thanks for watching.
Thank you very much, Mohammed Kolo, for the business package on Good Morning Nigeria. Next, we'll go to the front pages of today's newspapers to check out the headlines. Baya Toyebe is right here with us for today's edition of the review of front pages of today's newspapers. Baya, morning and welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Today is Friday. Kirian, good morning. And good morning, Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
Rain. I thought August break was here, but the rain are still persisting.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. August is coming to a close, and the heavens haven't ceased.
Opened up, yes.
All right. I have the This Day newspaper here, and above the nameplate, let's begin with the story on Buhari signs extradition treaty with the UAE, other parks to check graft, and of course boost economy. The story is on page 10 of This Day newspapers. And again, another headline here: 38 senior army officers petition president over wrongful dismissal. That's page 52. Now, below the nameplate, pulling Nigeria from the brink. Arewa youths rescind quit notice. Kanu agrees to end agitation if nation is restructured. With the writer here, Mwabeze says National Assembly lacks power to restructure. 6 new constitution. Well, if National Assembly lacks power to restructure, these are the representatives of the people. We shall get to that during your analysis, but I think it's very important. And now, besides the photograph on This Day front page, NBC directed to sanction stations propagating hate speech. The story is on page 10 of This Day. And of course, NAF instructor dies in Kaduna plane crash, page 50 of This Day newspaper. Maybe I'll quickly go through Tribune before Kingsley will give us the headlines of what he has. Now, the Tribune newspaper, below the nameplate, I am 99, these are political statements now. I am 99% in PDP, says Makinde. I'm ready to return to PDP if, that's Ladija. Then Alawa Kala will consult, says 8. That's the stories, those stories on page 8 of Tribune. And besides that story, we have Buhari moves to recover looted funds, signs agreement on anti-corruption, security, food security, and others. Details on page 31 of the Tribune newspapers. And all right, now below that we have Arewa youths withdraw quit notice to Igbo. That's the Tribune newspaper, the major headline this morning on page 8. And of course, that's not without the writer here that says call for Kanu's arrest. Biafra agitation continues despite withdrawal of quit notice, says IPOB. And you can see a picture there showing the former President Olusegun Obasanjo and, of course, a group chairman of UBA. Then, besides that, we have a hate speech issue. Federal government directs NBC to sanction airing stations, page 34. NANS, UI reject JAM's admission cutoff marks, page 34. And now, police arrest man over attempt to use father, siblings, 5 others for ritual. That's another interesting story there on page 30 of Tribune. Now, below the photograph, National Assembly is big obstacle to restructuring. Southern leaders on page 34. Pro-Buhari rallies hold in Kano and Niger State today. That's on page 31 of the Tribune. Kingsley.
All right. The number of the stories that you read are also on the front pages of Blueprint as well as Daily Trust, which are the papers that I have. And particularly 2 of those stories, one regarding the quit notice earlier issued by Northern Youths. They said, below the nameplate of Daily Trust, the headline is Northern Youths withdraw Igbo quit notice. That's how it is captured there. Plus, of course, the anti-corruption fight, which is the kicker, says Buhari ratifies pact with UAE. That story is right there. If you come to the Blueprint, you also have it there. The other one is on hate speech as well as the quit notice. Blueprint. According to Blueprint, below the nameplate says Arewa youth suspend quit notice and ask Igbo to stop arms stockpiling. Arewa youth suspend quit notice. And then the list story, of course, is on hate speech with the kicker. Arrest erring monarchs and clerics. That's according to the Sultan. Of course, there are other headlines on the front page there. At the foot of the front page of Blueprint, it's also the story on President Muhammadu Buhari signing a number of bilateral agreements, including the one of extradition with some countries. Bio, let's take those stories and then we'll return to the stories.
Okay. Now, there are 2 dominant stories now, and they are all centered on one basic theme, that of peaceful coexistence and of also rejecting what has been described largely as intemperate speech, hate speech and quit notices. First, let's start with the issue of the quitting. The National Broadcasting Commission has been enjoined to stem the growing wildfire of hate speech that has dominated radio and television. The Minister of Information, addressing the 25th anniversary and 3rd annual lecture of the National Broadcasting Commission, said that if you tune to many radio stations, one will be shocked by the careless incitement of violence going on, as well as the level of insensitivity to the multi-religious and multi-ethnic mix of our nation. He says the lamentation is that radio programs anchor tend to be not concerned as if they are willing collaborators to that. And he cautions, we cannot travel the path of radio, television, livre the Mills Collins of Rwanda that fueled ethnic hate that led to 800,000 deaths in 1994. And therefore, he read the Rights Act that the National Broadcasting Commission must get its act together and continue to sanction those who indulge in hate speech. The Sultan of Sokoto, who was guest of honor at the ceremony, also recalled that only a day earlier on, he was falsely reported. And he noted from an advertisement of the National Broadcasting Commission that says, we regulate, we monitor, we sanction. And he admonished that they should add, we should punish, that every station should be punished. And that's why you have the headline there that says religious leaders and even traditional rulers who indulge in hate speech must all be sanctioned. Now, talking about the quit notices, the reports are conflicting. Some papers are saying the Arewa Youth quit notice is withdrawn. That is what Vanguard reports. And they also meet with Ezendigo. The Daily Sun also report that Arewa Youth suspend the quit notices. But this day has a combination of a headline that says Arewa Youth rescind quit notices. Kanu, on the other hand, agrees to end agitation if the nation is structured. Now, this happened at a press conference yesterday when the youth said they have now suspended their quit notices. The spokesman for the group said they did that due to pressure from national, political, traditional, religious, as well as cultural leaders, and pressure from the Department of State Services. They also said that it was done out of respect and allegiance to one united and peaceful and prosperous Nigeria. But they also warned that the notice of forcing the issue of secession to be addressed has been achieved by their quit notice, and also said, however, safeguards is required against future ethnic tensions. And they lamented that this is to ensure that those agitation for separation do not regroup later to prepare for war. And you see one of the headlines already alleging that arms are being amassed for war. And so these are serious concerns that must be addressed by the security agencies.
Well, I just wondered, in terms of semantics, as you pointed out, that there are differences in the way the headlines have been cast. And in fact, from our news report earlier, where our colleague Lydia Bassey was reading the news, we saw the video clip there, Kirian. Now, if you go back to the Blueprint front page as well as the Daily Trust, Blueprint captions this way: Arewa Youth suspend quit notice. And then for Daily Trust, it says Northern Groups withdraw Igbo quit notice. There's a difference between suspension and recession or withdrawal, because we have seen ASU play on that in recent times when they embarked on their latest round of industrial action. Oh, they said what happened last time was that we merely suspended our industrial action, so we have resumed. So I think that, but the intent is, of course, is that, look, there is no more animosity. Yeah. We are living together peacefully. So
I think it's a matter of semantics, yes. And perhaps in some cases, poor use of words. Because if you ask me, what I are saying is that they have totally withdrawn that order. That's from my own.
To allay the fears of all Nigerians, a distinction must be made between suspension and withdrawal. Withdrawal means that it's no longer tenable.
Suspension is that it can be revised.
Yeah,
okay.
But the spirit
the anxieties, the quit notices, and the separatist threats have raised have not gone down.
So let's go for what is more positive now. Positive, they have withdrawn.
That's the intention. The intention is that there be peace in the land.
Yes.
But the other point, that's the other issue that Bayo also discussed with regard to hate speech. Again, the intention is to be appreciated. Excuse me, that NBC is now being directed to sanction. If you are a regulator, I thought the point was always being made that, look, we need strong institutions rather than strong men. How do you have strong institutions if those institutions do not, of their own, as we say, suo motu, exercise their authority? Does any institution which is a regulator need to be guarded, persuaded, or otherwise cajoled, to carry out its responsibility? You impose sanctions on every stations and let us hear those who will cry.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
Broadcast regulation is soft touch, and the approach in Nigeria, because of the benefit of my experience in National Broadcasting Commission, is such that all broadcasters and all stakeholders gather to agree on a Nigerian broadcasting code.
Absolutely.
That sets the stone, and in the code, for every infraction, there is a concomitant sanction that goes with it.
That's right.
But this development of hate speech is a new one, and that was why the Director General said there are going to be 3 innovations, and one of them is effective sanctioning for hate speech. In fact, people pointed out at the conference that some proprietors of stations were getting as much about 2 million, 1 million for some content which contain hate speech. So if the National Broadcasting Commission fined 500,000, they still have made profit from the money they make. So the sanctions were not effective enough.
Yeah,
I think the National Broadcasting Commission...
Part of the problem here is the fact that we are not even sure whether the NBC has the capacity to monitor over 120 or more of radio stations in this country. TV stations are also growing using cable channels and all that. So that's going to be a very big issue for NBC to be able to have the capacity to monitor.
There is a physical monitoring and there's a monitoring by way of technology. And the NBC has embarked on electronic monitoring to cope with the digitization which is going to force onto the nation myriads of channels.
All right, now let's look at the Nigerian pilot and the last newspaper we have here, the Nigerian pilot, below the nameplate. Illegal secret employment, Senate to pass existing vacancies bill, says the Senate President Saraki. That's on page 5. And the main headline, Buhari strengthens anti-graft war and signs extradition treaty with United Arab Emirates, UAE, and other countries. That's on page 6 of the Nigerian pilot. And then below the photograph there, we have Kwara grants amnesty to civil servants with fake certificates. Yeah, that's another story there. They grant amnesty to civil servants with fake certificates. And then there's another there.
What happens to the offense of forgery and outrage?
But that's what I would like Bayo to address. Now, Nance rejects new jump cut-off marks. Now, on the foot of the Nigerian pilot, there are some interesting stories there. Don't boycott Anambra election. Leaders of thought beg Kanu IPOB. Then Appeal Court sacks Sekibo from Senate on page 6. Then Oshibajo in Taraba meets stakeholders over Mambila crisis on page 5. 27-year-old Nigerian marries 72-year-old British granny, denied visa.
All right, but well, you can see, I mean, Kyria, if you reversed the figures in their ages, the young man, sorry, the groom is 27 and the bride is 72. So if you transpose the figures, then it's sort of that. Well, Bayo, very quickly, blueprint. Yes. Just say at the foot of the front page of Blueprint. Okay, at the foot of the front page of Blueprint, Kogi Assembly locks out journalists, and then traditional ruler backs law degree at 73. And ASU NEC meets today on strike. So, Bayo, those are the stories that we have on the front pages of the papers. We'd like to thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoy your weekend. See you on Monday.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll go into our principal item for discussion.
I don't come out my hand from oil bunkering. General, what you gonna yarn? What did the yarn say? I don't understand though. Because they spoil our water and our environment. And they cause our people serious harm. Militants say, you know good. Me, I not do against Sam. Because why? Change begins with me.
The
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Get high on books, not drugs. Only those who hate themselves fill their bodies with smoke, drugs, and harmful substances.
He broke my heart.
These days, when young lady or young man has emotional upheavals, he or she abuses cough syrup with codeine, some sniff glue, sewage, even petrol.
I'm already finished. Eh? Just let me finish myself completely.
Alas, where is our tomorrow headed? This week on Professor John Bull, we introduce to you high people, all of them, one by one. Find out why Jumoke wasted her school fees and why Flash went local.
Come on, stay one place, liar.
Over and out. Brought to you by Glow.
The largest data network, Glow Unlimited.
All right, welcome back. But if you just joined us, it's Good Morning Nigeria still on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, to mark 1 year of polio-free status in Nigeria thus far, the chair of the International Polio Plus campaign for Rotary Worldwide, Mr. Michael McGovern, visited Port Harcourt, that's the capital of Rivers State. Now, we'll take the background report of that visit before we introduce our guests for the discussion segment.
Michael McGovern was at the Rumokoro Health Center where he joined the Deputy Governor of Rivers State, Epalebo Harry Banigo, to immunize children during a special polio immunization program to commemorate the 1-year polio-free status of Nigeria by District 9147 of Rotary International. He expressed delight at the large turnout of women with their babies in spite of the heavy downpour for the immunization, hoping that it be sustained.
It's a well-run program, and I'm very happy with the work of all the different parties to ensure that in the end the drops are getting into the mouths and that we get to that polio-free world.
The State Deputy Governor Epalebo Harry Banigo encouraged more mothers to immunize their children, adding that government is making every effort to strengthen the primary health care services, outreach services, and all campaign services to ensure that children are protected against poliomyelitis and other vaccine-preventable diseases.
Until the last child is reached, no child is safe.
The fact that we in Rivers State, we have not had any case within the last 15 years, isn't any reason for us to be complacent.
It shows that they have the good of our children in their hearts. They want our children to be healthy.
The last case of polio in Nigeria was reported on the 21st of August, 2016.
And we would like to welcome to the studio the chairman of International Polio Plus campaign, chairman for Rotary Worldwide, Michael McGovern. Thanks for joining us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you.
And also the executive secretary, National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, Dr. Faisal Shuaib. He's also here with us in the studio. You're welcome.
Good morning.
Okay, quickly, let's start with Michael McGovern. He has a wide experience when it comes to the monitoring of polio programs across the globe, for Rotary International. Now, how would you assess the current status of polio in Nigeria?
There's been great progress made around the world and here in Nigeria. There's only 3 countries now where we have really strong fears of polio. Nigeria is one of them. We had some cases about a year ago up in Borno, but the government's been working on it. We've been having cooperation from all the different parties, and we're confident that with the continued efforts that are now ongoing, that soon Nigeria will be polio-free.
Well, the country was quite excited a couple of years ago when we assumed that we had virtually overcome polio until We saw one case first in Borno and then another case in Borno. What possibly could have gone wrong from your background analysis?
It was simply a matter that some areas were inaccessible. I think everyone's aware there's been some conflict in that region, and it's typical in areas of conflict that there'll be areas that vaccines aren't the top priority. Fortunately, the government is working. It went down to only about 25% of the children now are inaccessible, particularly in the Lake Chad, on some of the islands, but it's real progress, and it's the World Health Organization, but it's the Nigerian government. But in the end, it's the mothers bringing the children forward to put the drops into the mouths so that we do eradicate polio.
All right, going to the Executive Secretary, from all indications, the areas where Nigeria could have difficulty in handling polio issue could be in the IDP camps across the country because of the convergence of families in one location. Now, how would you look at, a surveillance system put in place to monitor polio in those centers?
Right. The IDP camps are really one of the areas where we have the best access to people who are running away from the insurgency in the northeast, and what we have health workers who go to the IDP camps to ask questions about any cases that look like polio. Actually, the places where we have the greatest challenges will be those areas that are inaccessible, but we have devised methods to ensure that we're able to carry out surveillance activities in even these inaccessible areas.
All right. The other question to also ask has to do, of course, with the current coverage of the vaccination program under the auspices of the primary health care agency. How well are we doing with regard to this?
Well, first and foremost, I have to put it on the table that right after we had the case of polio last year, in August 21st, Mr. President showed decisive action by providing the resources that was required to mount a massive campaign against the outbreak. There was a campaign across the whole of the West African sub-region that was coordinated from the Federal Ministry of Health. Again, the Honorable Minister of Health showed leadership. Now, we've done a lot of good work with the campaigns. Our challenge now is how we can sustain the good work by ensuring that our kids get the routine immunization vaccines that they need. And it is why we keep encouraging mothers to ensure that the kids get all the full complements of vaccines in the routine immunization program. Unfortunately, this has not happened as well as we'd like to happen. The Penta-3 coverage, which is really the index to assess routine immunization coverage, is only at 33%. And this is why at NPHCDA, we have declared a state of public health concern on the number of kids that have not been vaccinated, and we have set up a unit known as the Emergency Routine Immunization Coordinating Center at NPHCDA, where we have partners and government officials looking at the data, analyzing the data, making sure the data is of good quality, and ensuring that people are now mobilized to the health facilities.
What factors account for these poor numbers of children who are exposed to vaccination?
But first and foremost, right, there are supply issues and there are demand issues. The supply issues are the fact that we need the health facilities to be there. The health facilities are there in some areas. They can be better in other areas. But there's also the demand issue, which is around parents actually taking the pains to take their kids to the health facilities when they are due for their vaccinations. That is not happening at the level that we do want to see.
Now, let me ask this question from a layman's point of view, and that's going to Michael McGovern. We quickly raised the aspect where, we had the clean slate, some years ago, only for it to reoccur again. Now, the reoccurrence is my concern here. When a place has been cleared, what would have been responsible for that?
This isn't about blame. This is about working together, moving forward to get this done. It was just a matter of surveillance. Those things happen. They've happened in many other parts of the world. But the important thing is when it was discovered, And when it was known that we weren't getting to all these children, everyone worked together to get it done. And we, you know, Rotary and the other partners couldn't be any more pleased with the efforts of the government to move forward to ensure that all children are accessible. So, you know, it's easy when anything goes wrong to blame this group or that group, but it accomplishes nothing. The important thing is to get the kids immunized and to make the world polio free, and as the doctor says, to also advance with other immunizations. That's a very important mission that we all have, is to ensure that children are immunized against all the diseases that vaccines help with.
You know, Rotary is known to, you know, be one of the leaders, you know, globally when it comes to polio eradication. How has it been lately, you know, especially in African countries?
How have I been?
How has it been lately, you know, in African countries?
You know, it's been good. There's been no polio cases in anywhere else in Africa. As we said, no cases for over a year. And, you know, we've been very welcomed. We have lots of Rotarians in Africa. We have over 8,000 Rotarians in Nigeria. So, you know, while I come here and I may be from away, you know, this program is really driven from Rotary's perspective by Rotarians in Nigeria assisting. It's not someone from me coming from away, but we're happy to financially support it. We're happy to work with the partners in coordinating. But you know, we're very confident of the ability of everyone to work here to get it done.
Is it possible to have a sense of a time frame with regard to the complete eradication of the white polio virus, considering that a place like Afghanistan, I think Pakistan, are still on the global map of the prevalence of the white polio virus?
Yeah, we've had 9 cases this year, 6 of those in Afghanistan, 3 in Pakistan. And, you know, even today in Pakistan, the Prime Minister personally is convening a group to make sure that everything is on track there. So overall, we think we're on track. You know, we could very well have already had the last case in Nigeria, but even then, we need to make sure that everyone continues to be immunized just in case, and in order to build up the immunity. So, you know, even after polio, we have the last case, we still have to continue the immunizations for several years thereafter. But it's on track. It's on track.
It took a while to get rid of smallpox. I mean, if you recall, before the WHO declared the world free of smallpox. That's what I'm asking in terms of a time frame. Are we optimistic? You know, let's say Nigeria gets the polio-free status, wild polio-free status. That would be a plus for the African continent, isn't it? But what are the risk factors of further exposure to the wild polio virus in Nigeria? That's Dr. Washwai.
So, as it were, we went 2 years without reporting white polio virus cases, and we thought we were done. But with the outbreak last year, it became clear that unless we have access to all the kids that live in the inaccessible areas, then there will always be that doubt. But right now, we have mounted surveillance methods to ensure that we get the best data that shows if there's any circulation. Right now, there are strong indications that there's no circulation. But unless and until we are absolutely sure that all kids have been reached and we have access to all kids, then we will be cautiously optimistic that we have actually crossed the 1-year landmark. And after the 1-year landmark, it takes 2 more years, and then Nigeria will be certified as having eradicated polio.
Dr. Shaib, the people living in those inaccessible areas are actually more vulnerable, you know, than children that could be accessed. Now, what is the guarantee, you know, that those inaccessible areas could be accessed, you know, in the nearest future? And again, how do you increase vaccination in those areas? And again, are you still having the problem of, you know, some villagers not accepting polio and all of that, the vaccines?
Right, so the answer to the first question is we're working with traditional leaders. We couldn't have gotten to where we are with polio eradication in Nigeria without the leadership shown by traditional leaders. So even in those inaccessible areas, we're working with them to identify where these kids are and then the opportunities for the kids to get the vaccinations. We're optimistic, and we're doing a countdown. From over 250 kids that had not been reached, we're talking about less than 150,000. So we're making gradual progress. And then really in terms of vaccine hesitancy, this is really more historical than current. There was a time when people had these conversations around whether vaccines causes infertility, but we've gone over 20 years, over 30 years as a matter of fact, and we're seeing these same kids that took the vaccines and are having kids all over the place. So the science is there. There's no doubt about the safety of the vaccines, and even the vaccine doubters now are not saying anything about any doubt whatsoever around vaccines. And this is why we keep saying that parents must provide vaccinations to their kids, because it is the single most important public health intervention that we have. It is an investment to provide these vaccines to these kids.
All right, let's go back again to an issue that we've always touched on in discussing polio on this program. Recall last year where those 2 cases were reported in Borno. Of course, we took on the subject, and in 2014 also, when the country was declared first, polio-free, we also took on the subject matter. For the benefit of those who are just coming of age now, what are the risk factors in contracting the wild polio virus?
Well, first and foremost, wild polio virus infection is a fecal-oral infection. So what it means is that where you have contamination of food or drink by the wild polio virus, most likely through fecal matter or water that is not clean, then people can contract the disease. So environmental sanitation is very, very key. Personal hygiene is something that is very, very strong. And in the course of the last few years, we've seen a gradual progress that has been made in Nigeria with regards to environmental and personal hygiene. But apart from that, a very key tool, of course, is access to vaccines. If people are able to get the vaccines, then it drastically reduces the risk whatsoever of the virus continuing to circulate.
Access to vaccine, very important. Is this vaccine produced in Nigeria at all? Do we have the capacity to produce polio vaccines?
So the polio vaccines are not manufactured in Nigeria. But if you've been following the news, I'm sure that only a few months ago you will have noticed that the Federal Minister of Health, under the leadership of the Honorable Minister of Health, has gone into a partnership with May and Baker to set the stage for local vaccine production. And this is something that this is a conversation that we're having at NPA with the Minister of Budget and National Planning.
At what level are they at the moment? Because we make a lot of these kind of bilateral arrangements or MOU arrangements, and at the end of the day, nothing is on ground. Is it maturing to fruition, the agreement?
But one thing that I think you will say about this administration is that we're moving from just plans to execution. We're delivering. And this is exactly what is happening at the Federal Ministry of Health. It's no longer about plans. It's no longer about MOUs. It's really about executing. And from what is on ground, we're taking every single step. The Honorable Minister of Health and the Honorable Minister of Budget and National Planning made it clear that in the next 2 years, we want to put on ground a solid foundation for local vaccine production. They are willing to put in the money and create the environment that is required for local vaccine production. In the past, Nigeria used to produce the yellow fever vaccine. Due to one factor or the other, that stopped. We can restart that. We have the human resources, we have the material resources to do that, right? And this is exactly what the government says they're going to do.
Yeah, just before I ask Mr. McGovern the other question, one issue that came up in the past, again, this is historical, but I don't know if it has any current implication. The potency of some of the vaccines was said to have been affected on account of poor preservation. What is it that we know now with regard to the protection of the vaccines? To say proper storage, improper handling, and so on and so forth.
We have found the vaccines to be very safe. In the past, there were actually 3 types of polio. One of the types of polio was eliminated. It was type 2 polio. They used to have circulating vaccine-derived polio. That, for the most part, is gone. We did away with giving vaccines for type 2 polio. Now we only give for type 1 polio and type 3 polio. They've been proven to be very safe, virtually no issues. I think you look at risk factors. When this began and you asked the effects of polio, there were 350,000 children in the world who were paralyzed each and every year with polio. there have been 16 million children who would have gotten polio if it hadn't been for this campaign. You know, we feel that the minute risk far outweighs the benefit that comes from all of the children who avoid getting the crippling disease.
The information you provided is useful, but my question actually was to Dr. Faisal Shoaib with regard to the handling of the vaccines. Some people used to say, look, vaccines had to be kept at certain temperatures. Right. In some of those remote locations where probably they didn't have refrigeration facilities and all of that and poor handling, there were issues with regard to the potency. What do we know now?
You're absolutely right. Again, this was from a historical perspective. In the last 10 years, the government has invested heavily in providing cold chain materials to ensure that from the point of manufacture to the time it gets to the mouth of the child, that the vaccines are kept at the appropriate temperature. So we do now have the cold chain equipment in most of the health facilities. In those health facilities where those cold chain equipment do not exist, the vaccines are transported on a daily basis to the health facilities when the routine immunization sessions are taking place. So the short answer to your question really is that the vaccines that are delivered are potent, right? Of course, you cannot avoid the situation where maybe so in some health facilities, people are not using the right equipment, but we also have enforcement and we have monitoring units that go around and make sure that this doesn't happen. And so far, we've been very, very impressed with the results. So the vaccines that have been provided in the immunization program are potent.
And we do get test results every week on the quality of the vaccinations. There's testing done to make sure that the cold chain is maintained. You know, I've been in many health centers. I see the refrigerators. I see the coolers. Every impression I've had is that those issues have been fully addressed.
All right, Mr. McGovern, it's been crystal clear, that Nigeria has made a huge success in administering polio vaccines to prevent poliomyelitis. Right. And we are looking forward now to how that can be sustained. So what should the country be doing at this moment to ensure sustenance, of the level we have already reached in administering polio vaccines?
We have confidence that the country will go forward. We had a meeting yesterday with the health minister, and he indicated that both he and the president are extremely committed to continuing to strengthen the health system, to continue to enhance routine immunizations. We've been having a dialogue on that with the health minister for over a year, and he's also implemented a separate task force to make sure that when the polio dollars disappear, that the gains are not lost, and that not only the gains not lost, but all of the lessons learned are built upon to ensure much better health returns for many years to come. He's really visionary.
That's interesting. Mr. McGovern, the issue of accessing otherwise inaccessible areas, it's one key point. Some persons believe that could be a critical success factor in the ultimate elimination of the poliovirus. Is Rotary, for instance, considering the application of robotics in the delivery of the vaccines to otherwise inaccessible areas, as we have seen in some parts of Africa, with regard to provision of medicines?
Yeah, no, we're not really looking at robotics because, as we were discussing, we have to make sure that the cold chain is maintained, that the vaccine is going to have its effectiveness. But, we're confident that parties working together, and I mean all parties, will make each year accessible. And then it's simply a matter of convincing the mothers and fathers to bring their children forward for the immunizations. But we're all working together to make sure that happens. And I think we can't overemphasize the dedication of the individual health workers that we see working in the camps, working in the health centers, and working throughout the health system. Very dedicated people.
For how long is Rotary committed to the elimination of the white polio virus? I mean, is it Rotary is going to be spending until polio is wiped out, or you have a threshold?
We have been working on this for over 30 years. We're not going to give up. We've gone from 350,000 cases a year to 9 cases. When you're at the finish line, you don't stop before you get there. You cross it. We will cross it with the government and with the other partners.
Now, are you satisfied with the role the Rotarians in Nigeria are playing in this direction? And are you also soliciting for support from other bodies across the globe to also engage in polio, vaccine production and dissemination?
Yeah, we have tremendous support from the Rotarians here in Nigeria. Dr. Funcho, a Lagos Rotarian, is a member of our International Polio Plus Committee. In fact, a past president of Rotary, Jonathan Magiagbi, who lives here in Abuja, has been instrumental in seeing this forward. So it's we're confident that all the support will be there, and that we'll continue to have the support of the Nigerian Rotarians, not only with polio immunization, but in all of these other endeavors. We saw some boreholes dedicated the other day. It's not just polio. The Rotarians here in Nigeria want to work so much in working with communities to provide additional services to them.
Back again to the executive director of the Primary Healthcare Agency. What level of cooperation, or should I also ask frustration, is there between the agency and the subnational governments, that is to say state and local governments?
So the national government is working with state governments, working in partnership with our development partners, World Health Organization, UNICEF, and we're all aligned on the task ahead. We've come so far, and we cannot stop now. We hope that in the course of the next few months, there will be more investments on the part of governors, towards routine immunization, because the national figure that we're seeing that we're not very happy about requires more support. And just a few weeks ago, we had engagement with the Nigeria Governors Forum, and they are very excited about the partnership that's going to see us possibly eliminate measles in Nigeria. We think that this kind of partnership will continue with routine immunization, and it's just a question of time before we cross that finish line.
What kind of investments do you expect from the state governments?
So we expect that for the measles campaign, there's a timeline of September 10 that all the governors have agreed to provide counterpart funding for measles campaign that's coming up later in the year. But for the routine immunization program, we also require that the governors provide funding on a monthly basis for routine immunization activities. So what we've recommended is that on a quarterly basis, the governors should ensure that the funds are made available so that the health workers in the ministries of health and the state primary healthcare development agencies are able to conduct supervisory visits and ensure that these activities are taking place in the health facilities.
Yeah, that's the Minister of Health who has been on this program and indeed elsewhere, where he's indicated a revival, government's effort to revive the primary health care centers. I'm not asking you to speak on that, but what is the nexus between the primary health care centers as well as the primary health care development agency in terms of the immunization efforts? Because these health care centers are located in local governments, and you haven't mentioned local governments. And we know the major challenges that we face in terms of good governance with regard to that tier of government.
So right, the local governments are very important, and what's happening now is that we're bringing primary health care under one roof. So even the health workers that used to work under the local government are now being brought under one management, one plan, one monitoring evaluation that we now call the primary health care under one roof. So they now work under the state primary health care development agencies in most places. So in terms of the minister's plan to ensure that we have at least one functional health facility per ward across the country. Now, this is something that is, moving at a pace that should be faster if we had enough funding. But it's very critical that we have these functional health facilities so that we can have routine immunization activities taking place in the health facilities. Yes.
All right, Dr. Faisal, Executive Director, Dr. Faisal Shuaib, that's right, Executive Director, National Primary Healthcare Development Agency. We'd like to appreciate your being with us on Good Morning Nigeria today.
Thank you very much.
And our thanks also to Mr. Michael McGovern. He is Chair of the International Polio Plus campaign. That's for Rotary Worldwide. Mr. McGovern, thank you for being on Good Morning Nigeria today.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
I don't think we've had you before on this program. It's on the Nigerian Television Authority. It's Africa's largest TV network. We also, of course, online. Mr. McGovern, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Okay, still good morning, Nigeria. We're reaching you, as always, live on the network service of the NTA. We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll take another health issue.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
You are still watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. And for the second leg of our conversation this morning, let's listen to this background report by Salihu Abdullahi on the outbreak of a strange disease in Kogi and Kwara states. Over to you, Salihu.
Despite several efforts by public and private sectors, including donor agencies from all over the world, in tackling diseases in Nigeria, one thing that still bothers the mind is the resurgence and spread of some of these killer diseases. This is despite federal government's efforts through its disease control programs in curtailing diseases. Of recent is the story of Orago community in Ifelodun local government area of Kwara State, and that of some communities in Kogi where the outbreak of a strange disease claimed many lives. The states of Kogi and Kwara are neighbors and unfortunately share similar agony. At least 60 people have been killed by a yet-to-be ascertained ailment in 3 communities in Kogi State. The affected communities are Okuran, Okoloke, and Isanloesa, all in Yagba West local government area of the state. Kogi State government confirmed the outbreak of the strange disease. The Commissioner for Health, Dr. Saka Audu, who visited the affected villages, however, said the deaths resulting from the illness were not caused by Lassa fever. He said a technical team was immediately set up and he took samples of blood and urine of victims to the General Hospital, Irua, Edo State, for investigation. However, Chief Medical Director of the General Hospital in Lokoja, Dr. Bolorunduro Ehalaye, told newsmen that 40 patients were rushed to the hospital, and after medical examination, only 6 people were admitted and they are responding to treatment. Authorities in neighboring Kwara State are also investigating reports of an outbreak of a disease which allegedly claimed some lives in Uruago community in Ifelodu local government area of the state. The community recorded the outbreak of Lassa fever as confirmed by the Kwara State Health Commissioner, Suleiman Alege, from the result of samples received from Virology Research Center, Lagos University Teaching Hospital.
One of the samples taken from Babala Primary Health Care Center in Ifelodun local government is confirmed to be positive of Lassa fever.
Recent outbreak of diseases, some known and others unknown, is raising concern and once again putting to test Nigeria's preparedness in tackling outbreaks. Therefore, experts on the program are set to share ideas and answer questions on the principal subject for discourse and provide tips on what needs to be done in an event of sudden outbreak and how such disease outbreaks can be prevented.
Thank you very much, Salih Abdullahi, for that background report. Indeed, we have guests with us in the studios here. First, we'd like to welcome Dr. Chike Ihekweazu, who is Director General, Nigeria Center for Disease Control. Dr. Ihekweazu, a pleasure to have you again, even though it's not a pleasant issue that we are discussing this morning.
Thank you, Ken.
A pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you, Ken.
All right. Also with us here is the Director in charge of Public Health of the Federal Ministry of Health. That's Dr. Evelyn Ngige. Dr. Ngige, a pleasure that you are with us on the program.
Thank
you. Okay.
All right, and we also have here in Abuja studio Dr. Saka Audu Haruna, Honorable Commissioner for Health, Kogi State. Good to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you. Good morning.
And we'd like to start with you straight away, because this happened in your own domain. And after the disease broke out in some communities in Kogi State, you must have carried out some findings, put us to speed, with what actually, happened.
Well, on 16th, to be precisely, on 16 August 2017, we received a text message from the DPO Egbe in Yagba West local government area of Kogi State. And he passed the information. He claimed that about 60 people died in Okoloke and its environment. And we went swiftly, immediately, to verify the information. We went to the community the following day, that was on 17th. And we met with the community leaders. We met with the prominent people in the community. And the first thing we did was to evacuate and transfer those who were still manifesting signs of diseases, all of them. About 43 of them were evacuated and transferred to the specialist hospital, Lokoja, for optimal care. When we arrived in the specialist hospital, only 6 of them were sick enough to warrant a hospital admission. The remaining 37 were treated on outpatient basis and were discharged home same day. But the 6 people, an assessment of gastroenteritis was made in 3 cases. The remaining 3 cases were treated for malaria fever, and they were all discharged within 4 days. They recovered fully and were discharged home within 4 days. Among those that manifested signs of gastroenteritis, one of the culture samples taken yielded heavy growth of Klebsiella. It could be from contaminants. It could also be from the patient. We all know that Klebsiella don't cause disease of public health importance of epidemic magnitude. So that was it. But when the rumor kept on, coming up, we went for the second trip to verify, to conduct an ideal verbal autopsy, list lining in the hospital. And the result we got was different from the acclaimed figure on the social media and some of the print medias.
How many fatalities have been recorded?
Yes, we tried to trace every case of death to the grave. from household to household, from family to family, and we're able to confirm that within the last 2 months, 19 people died, 14 adults and 5 children. Among the adults, 9 of them were male, 5 female, and the children 2 male, 3 female.
So it's not 60 people that died,
no,
as
no, at
people
all.
are speculating.
And also, I want to mention here that these were isolated cases. Even where we recorded up to 2 deaths in a household, they were not related. According to the family members, they manifested different symptoms. So these are random cases from random pathologists.
So these cases have been, investigated thoroughly in a good laboratory to know
My
the causes.
team stayed there for 4 days with the community people.
Well, when you say that over a 2-month period, you recorded 19 deaths, 14 of them adults, 9 male, was this in the same community? Are they in the same occupation?
This is an area that is predominantly inhabited by Fulani Hausa ethnic group, and they live in clusters of villages. You understand? We have in total 6 villages around Okoloke, and we took our time. Some of them you have to cross river, but we thank God we were able to do it because His Excellency, the Alhaji Yahya Bello, the Executive Governor of Kogi State, gave us an ultimatum because when he heard the information, he couldn't sleep. He gave us an ultimatum, and we needed to meet up the ultimatum, the required fund, everything. We didn't lack anything, so there was no reason not to do the job.
I understand. Dr. Saka, the question I'm asking is, look, is this the same, virtually the same community? What is the radius that we are looking at, that 19 persons have died in a 2-month period, probably manifesting similar or related symptoms?
This is a place that is, if you are familiar with Yagba West.
I'm not.
No, yeah. Sorry. It takes more than 1 hour from Egbe to Okoloke local government. And some of those villages, because they are hard to reach villages, you understand, it takes up to 1 hour from each village to the other.
Now, what about this issue of Kwara being involved in this? Is there any community in Kwara that leads close to the community you're talking about?
It's a border town with Ogowaro in Kwara State. So these people actually mix together.
Now, in your conviction as a medical personnel, do you believe that there is a disease moving from one community to the other?
Well, if it's well, what I can say here, there's no epidemic. There's no epidemic. There's no strain disease.
All right. Thank you very much, Commissioner for Health, Kogi. We'll come back to you in the course of the conversation. Already, we earlier introduced the Head of the Department of Public Health, Dr. Evelyn Ngige, as well as DG for the Center for Disease Control. But just to indicate that we spoke earlier with the Commissioner for Health in Kwara, who gave also his own side of the story. The Commissioner for Health in Kwara is Dr. Mahmoud Babatunde Ajegbe. He spoke on the situation with regard to that. He said that the report of some number of deaths, we understand that the number of deaths from the strange disease, according to him, that is false. But they are however investigating what again has been described as a strange disease from Orago and Babanla, I believe, area. That some 13 samples have been taken in 2 batches and sent to Lagos for further evaluation. But 2 persons have tested positive so far for Lassa fever, and these 2 persons are a father and a son. Both of them, he says, are receiving treatment. That's from Kwara State. There are 2 confirmed cases of Lassa fever. 13 samples have been taken from persons who have taken these samples. Of course, have been sent to Lagos for further analysis, but there are no the reports rather of some 70 deaths or more that such reports are not true. That's from Kwara State. Well, let's bring in now the Director General of CDC, Dr. Hirkwe. So we've seen in the media both regular and online media and then social media, were reports about the number of deaths. And the Commissioner for Health in Kogi here, of course, also indicated that he got a text message from the DPO, who, of course, is in the area, indicating that some 60 persons have died. But still, well, the number of fatalities, we don't know what your figures are. That's one. And secondly, the mystery surrounding the ailment is still referred to as a strange disease. What is strange about the disease?
Thank you, Kingsley. I mean, what is strange about this story is the story itself. We have, to be honest, we have to actually commend the work by Dr. Saka and Dr. Ajabo in Kwara and Kogi states. Our team have been in touch with them almost on a daily basis over the last week, because these stories, once they get into the press these days, it gets propagated around the world, and we've got calls from all over asking what is going on in Nigeria. The risk analysis has been very thorough in this case, and we haven't found any outbreak. There have been 2 cases confirmed of Lassa confirmed in Kwara. Kwara is actually not one of the epicenters of the Lassa fever outbreak. Most cases this year have been in Edo and Ondo states, actually. So, but however, I mean, the important thing is there's a constant risk analysis of these cases. Nigeria CDC, and as well as its parent ministry, the Ministry of Health, and critically, the state epidemiology departments in all the states, they are our colleagues on the front line. So every rumor at NCDC, we have a small, we call them an event-based surveillance team. They scan the media every day, bring reports, we investigate. When there's a need to go and respond, we respond. Just yesterday, we sent a team to investigate the outbreak of cholera in Kebbi State. So there's a constant support of states going on. And this is just one of those that we've found out not to be true, but somehow has developed a life of its own and grown, attracted a lot of attention around the world.
Dr. Hekwazu, with respect to all the perspectives to this story that we've had for some weeks now, Dr. Saka has just confirmed that 19 deaths within 2 months. Now, are we not questioning, or should we not be questioning the death rate of people in that area? And with respect to what the Commissioner for Health in Kwara State did say, that 2 cases of Lassa fever have been identified in the area. Are you not looking at a situation where there is something happening? There is a disease, perhaps not found, not given a name yet, but the way the thing is moving and people are dying within that rate. Now, what would be your suggestion as to what should be done?
So, okay, I think that's an important question. But remember, the one inevitability in life is death. So we will all die at some point. Really, the question here is, are we finding more cases or deaths than we expect in a specific geographical area over a specific time period, which is, in effect, the definition of an outbreak? So here, we really haven't found a cluster of deaths or a cluster of cases. These are communities, like Dr. Saka said, people have died, and we haven't found that they're linked in any way. So, however, I think there are 2 key points here. We haven't discarded this story because it is important that we investigate every time there's a new story of cases or deaths of illnesses. We, at NCDC, and actually with the support of the Federal Ministry of Health through one of its rapid intervention funds last year, we have increased our diagnostic capacity in the labs across the country to make this diagnosis when they happen. But the key thing, I think, is there are a group of colleagues, both at the state and the national level, that are ready and able to investigate these cases at any time. And what we have committed to Nigerians is to be transparent with them. Our Lassa fever report, we publish it every week. We put it on the website so that everyone knows where we are with Lassa specifically. We did the same with meningitis. This is in the spirit of the current government, to be open and transparent in order not to hide anything. And that's, I think, why you see 3 very senior colleagues from the ministry, both at the state and at the federal ministry level, here today to explain to Nigerians what is going on.
Let's bring in Dr. Evelyn Ngigena, Head of Department of Public Health at the Federal Ministry of Health. Again, Dr. Hekwazu has said, let's say, what is strange about the disease is the story itself, but 19 persons in a space of within a space of 2 months, plus the fact that the story just won't go away, as it were. Do we have a public health emergency in either Kwara or Kogi or both?
Well, I won't say categorically there's a public health emergency, because as the previous speakers had stated, there's no direct linkage between these groups of deaths, and perhaps further investigation will need to be, investigations will need to be conducted on cases of people who have recovered, and even it may be necessary to go to the morgue, or even, as he said, those that have been buried, to see if there's any tissue or fluids that can be gotten from them and analyzed further, because sometimes when those deaths are reported after they have been buried, it becomes difficult to say categorically these deaths or series of deaths have been caused by this particular outbreak of a particular infection. So we are actually working to see if there's anything to be discovered.
What's your response? And the question can be taken by any of your medical doctors talking about this, because some commentators were, again, on the basis of the fact that this was being called a strange ailment, speculating that, look, from the community that the incident is said to have occurred, that perhaps this is some zoonotic ailment that has now jumped to a human host. Is there any sense in which we can analyze that, or is far-fetched?
Well, Kingsley, I think it's an important assumption to make, because a lot of the diseases that we now know circulate in humans actually started that way, whether it's Lassa, Ebola, HIV, they all moved from initially an animal host that started circulating in humans. And we are constantly on the lookout for this. At the moment, we haven't found any evidence that that has happened. But we are constantly on the lookout, and that's really why I said we shouldn't discard this story completely. But I think critically that three good news stories out for Lassa specifically. Firstly, there's a lot of awareness, a lot more than last year. So people are actually testing a lot more. That means we're finding a few more cases, which is, in a way, a good thing. It means that we're finding more. It will appear that we have more cases. Things will appear to get worse before they get better. But in a way, it's a good thing. Secondly, the case fatality ratio for Lassa is going down. So we're finding more cases, but we're losing less. That means we're increasing our capability and our capacity to treat and manage these cases. And secondly, there's a concerted effort now among the states, the federal government, the Federal Ministry of Health, the Nigeria CDC, to really address this issue. But there's no magic bullet. There's nothing we can just do. We can't get rid of all the rodents in the country. It's a wish we had, but it's extremely difficult in our context. So we will continue working hard with all our colleagues in the fight against epidemic-prone diseases in Nigeria.
Now, gentlemen and ladies, let's return to the so-called strange disease. And I'd like to put this question to Dr. Saka. Now, we understand that this disease began to manifest in the community a few weeks after the previous Salah celebrated about 2 months ago. But one wonders why it took a long time for Kogi State government to begin investigation at that point. Because, like Dr. Hekwazi said, that we shouldn't just discard the story like that. That's why you're still carrying out a laboratory investigation to see what was really wrong, or whether people just died their natural death or out of from other diseases, right? So why didn't you start up in good time, to investigate this before you go to the point where we're now recording 19 deaths?
Thank you for the question. I think it is necessary to clarify here that there is a proper channel of information when it comes to disease notification from disease surveillance. It should have come from our recognized informants, reporting directly to the DSNO, Disease Surveillance and Notification Officer of the local government, from there to DSNO at the state level. That is the proper channel. But this one came from a DPO. That is the reason we have to question that report. Secondly, earlier, before we received that report, there was a case of suspected Lassa fever that was transferred to Equa Hospital in Egbe. We sent our officers in collaboration with WHO. We took samples and sent to one of the designated laboratory in Federal Teaching Hospital, Irua. And immediately, within 48 hours, we received their reports, which was negative for Lassa fever. So at that point, we were at rest. So it wasn't as if we started investigating the rumor, let me call it a rumor, just recently. We started the investigation quite 2 weeks before that time.
This DPO, sorry, this DPO that sent this message, has it been contacted?
Yes, we reported back to him with our finding. He insisted that he has informants and that he believed solely on that informant that is a man of integrity.
Because that's their primary assignment.
Again, for the third time, we went to meet the informants who took our team back to the community again. But what he said was not corroborated by the community people. And then the graveyard was an old one. No name tag, and we couldn't identify any of the...
all right, Dr. Saka Haruna, that's Commissioner for Health. Earlier when we were reporting on the status of Kwara with regard to the allegation of multiple deaths arising from strange disease, we had said that it was the Commissioner of Health. Actually, it was the Commissioner of Information who disclosed that the reports concerning some 70 or so deaths, that those reports are incorrect, and that, of course, there are 2 persons who are down now with Lassa fever, a father and a son, and they're receiving treatment. Information coming from the Kwara State Commissioner for Information. Now, still with you, Dr. Saka Haruna, that's Commissioner for Health, Kogi State. We are still not clear as to the nature of the ailment that has taken down these 19 persons, other than, again, what was reported in the press that there were manifestations of symptoms of gastroenteritis infection. But do we have a sense of what the disease burden is like in Kogi? Do we know what are the most prevalent ailments, other than, say, malaria?
Just like any other community in the tropical area, the most prevalent disease is malaria. And we do have random cases of gastroenteritis. And mainly it's malaria, because majority of the 43 that we evacuated and transferred to the state specialist hospital were diagnosed with malaria fever.
Now, let's return to Dr. Evelyn Ngige as the Director of Public Health in the Ministry of Health. Well, is there any, emergency mechanism, if you like, that exists in the ministry, possibly under your purview, that is responsible for, carrying out first and foremost investigation when such reports come from any part of the country?
Yes. As you know, the Nigeria Center for Disease Control is actually the disease investigating parastatal of the Ministry of Health. So when we have such reports, we direct them appropriately, and we also have a small team within the ministry that does a joint does the investigation jointly with the Nigeria Center for Disease Control.
Well, Dr. Yekweazu, we're discussing this strange disease, and to the extent that Lassa fever appears to have been eliminated as the cause of the fatalities, and you've talked extensively about Lassa fever. I will recall a few weeks ago on this program, when there was an outbreak at Lagos University Teaching Hospital, and then, of course, there were other cases around Lagos, and we had guests on the program, and we recall that Professor Agmolaha, former Vice Chancellor of Abuja University, said that there was a committee that was set up with regard to working, I think, on a vaccine or working on some remedial measures for all of this, but he said that that committee was in abeyance. Could you speak to this?
Well, again, just it's interesting. Just this week, there was a meeting in Abuja for all the stakeholders on Lassa fever, on the Lassa fever response, to critically review the entire season of Lassa. Look at what we've done well, look at what we're not doing well, and improve on what we're doing. So members of that committee were all invited and provided advice and guidance to the national response, which we will then translate into our response moving forward. So there's no doubt about it, the opportunities to improve the work that we're doing on Lassa, both in terms of case detection, surveillance, communicating risk to the people, ensuring that everyone knows what to do. So yes, the committee activities slowed down a little bit, but they're all back on board. The committee is actually chaired by Professor Oyewale Tomori, who was at the meeting with his colleagues early this week. So we're actively seeking the advice of these senior colleagues to drive the work that we're doing at the federal and state levels.
All right, thank you, Dr. Ihekwazo. Nigerians are beginning to react to our conversation this morning on Good Morning Nigeria. Of course, it has to do with health, and everybody should be interested in that. And let's go to what some Nigerians have been tweeting this morning. Shelia Fema Peter said, we are quick to ascertain number of deaths and casualties, but reluctant in taking preventive and control measures.
Festus Akimboye tweets, states and federal governments must ensure that those affected by these unknown diseases in Kogi and Kwara have access to the right care and treatment.
Now, Goulding says Kwara government should, as a matter of necessity, actually bring facilities to curb this outbreak. And they said that UNICEF also should provide help.
Dole Jack Solomon, it's imperative for the federal government to take full responsibility by getting its technical team on health to work to arrest the spread of this disease, if the disease is known.
Now, Muhammad Jamil Sadara, time like this, we need our research institutions in medical line to come to our rescue. We don't need to wait for government. Philanthropists also can.
Lasisi Taufik Taiwo, the resurgence of an unknown killer ailment is all about low or poor environmental sanitation and personal hygiene.
Now, Muhammad Sadara once more, a community with a university, for that matter, inflicted with the unknown disease, and the medical students carry out research every year.
Dele Jack Solomon says medical outfits in Nigeria should join NTA in sensitizing Nigerians on good hygiene and environmental cleanliness to prevent the spread of this disease if the cause is known.
Now, Sani Michael or Mokoja, I hope I will get this correctly. The resurgence of unknown killer disease is a subject to how poor we take care of our environment and our immigration.
This is Clifford Agugwese. It says technology is now available for the service of the health sector and must be robustly deployed in tackling the disease cases.
Now, from Clifford Agugwese, if we cannot get the diagnosis right, and we cannot get the prognosis right, and that's about it all from the tweets we have so far. Many more Nigerians are expected to also tweet and engage in the conversation this morning. And gentlemen and lady, I think you have all agreed that something unusual really happened, but not properly or not yet identified. You are working towards identification of what may have taken place in the area, and it's also known that people have not died at that level in that community in recent years. So that's why somebody has to raise alarm when people started dying.
Kirian, I'm curious about the point raised by the Commissioner for Health in Kogi, that's Dr. Saka Haruna. What kind of autopsy was conducted? Are there religious, cultural hindrances to effective autopsy for us, for the government and then the public health officials to properly identify the cause of 19 deaths in 2 months in perhaps, a radius? I mean, even if the communities are 1 hour far apart, it could be on account of poor road infrastructure. What were the hindrances, if any, with regard to a proper autopsy?
Well, these are predominantly Muslim communities, so they will not accept it. We throw it at them, because we want them to accept us. Acceptability initially was the case. We have to identify an interpreter who is also a teacher, Hausa Fulani ethnic group, before we could get along with them. We intend to do so if the community will permit that. But currently, what we have done recently was to take samples from the available water supply and also from the common foodstuff. And this will undergo chemical analysis because we don't want to leave any stone unturned. So we will overcome this. And the whole mystery surrounding this death, I think, will be revealed.
I think one interesting thing here is that you are working in collaboration with also the disease control, exactly. An establishment known for control of diseases. And Dr. Hekwazu, having said all you have said, in this program, moving forward, because this could also happen in any other part of the country. How prepared are you? Because when this is rainy season, of course, it's going gradually, but rainy season usually comes with certain diseases and what have you. So how prepared are you, in case such thing breaks out in any other part of the country?
At the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, we are always prepared. This is the reason for our existence. This is why the Federal Ministry of Health and the federal government created this agency, to have the capacity to primarily prevent, secondly detect when they happen, and finally to respond. We do this, however, in collaboration with the states and local governments. It's a big country, very diverse. So as well as the team of about over 100, about 150 that work within NCDC and the
How much of collaboration are you getting from the states and local government?
The states have been increasingly collaborative. We're not doing them a favor. We're mutually dependent on each other, on our existence, on our work. So we can't do our work without the states. We never go to a state. We would not go to Yaba West, for instance, without first going to Lokoja and going with the state teams. So we always work together. And this is what we do every day. Information comes in either through the surveillance infrastructure like my colleague described, or through press reports. For every incident, we would make calls, we would investigate, ensure that samples get to the lab, deploy a response if necessary, and then respond to the outbreak appropriately as it happens.
Okay, well, back again to Dr. Saka Haruna. Has there been a slowdown in the number of fatalities in those communities where 19 persons have died?
It is true.
No,
the death rate has...
I'm not making an assumption, yes.
Okay. Well, what we did since the information came through and a haphazard channel, we put in place, increase the number of informants in the community who will now report to the DSNO, through the DSNO at the local government level to the state level. And that has been established. And so far, since last week, we have not recorded any case of deaths or illness.
Okay. Thank you. Dr. Evelyn Ngige, there is some potential challenge with getting to the root of the cause of the 19 deaths. I mean, if we cannot have a full-scale autopsy, I mean, if there are cultural issues, of course, this sometimes can be a challenge to overcome. What mechanism might then be deployed in terms of public health safeguard to try to get to the root of this matter?
Well, we are still working on, samples are still being analyzed of persons who have come down with illness. But my take on it is that the states, together with the local government, should do a lot more in terms of educating the populace on the need for, ensuring that the environments are clean. Because many of these zoonotic diseases have to do with poor environmental sanitation. And then even those others that may not be zoonotic diseases that, result in gastroenteritis also have to do with, environmental sanitation, water hygiene, personal hygiene, and all that. So if we're able to ensure that, the our environments are clean, we don't expose our foodstuffs, because they spread a lot of their grains on the roadside, and rodents go over and defecate or urinate and then pass some of those viruses, and that is when they get, infected. And if it's possible to let them know that there are they should develop other ways of, drying their grains so that they don't, have to expose themselves unduly.
You see them do that here, even in Abuja.
And if you are traveling along the Nigerian highways,
yes.
You see on the two sides of the road, it's part of our culture.
And that contaminated food and water. You should avoid, their food and their water being contaminated. I tell you, a lot of these so-called strange illnesses will be, will not, yes, and then Nigerians also have a poor health-seeking behavior. A lot of them will be sick. They stay at home, take native medicine instead of coming to the health facility. I tell you, if those persons that were ill had gone to the health facilities, if there were any deaths, that is, if there would have been any deaths, because if they had gone to the health facility, they would have, I'm sure, managed them well enough.
Early diagnosis,
yes,
perhaps.
Because some of these illnesses to a high level of suspicion. You need to have a high level of suspicion.
Dr. Ihekweazu, earlier when you were speaking, you talked about an outbreak of cholera elsewhere. What is the status now?
Yeah, so this is really unfortunately the season where we find an increase in cholera cases across the country. This has been the historical pattern. This year we had a preparatory meeting very early in the season to get the states ready, supply them with rapid diagnostic kits across the country. So almost every week we're supporting one state or the other with a cluster of cholera cases. This week we're supporting Kebbi State. They have had an increase. We've supported them virtually for the past 2 weeks, but yesterday we made a decision that it actually requires a team to be sent to support the state. So in a way, again, cholera, just like Lassa, is just that the challenges are slightly different. The underlying cause is access to potable drinking water. And, as much as we can do from the NCDC and the states to support the response, if we don't solve that fundamental primary problem of providing our people with potable water, we will continue to have cholera.
All right, thank you very much indeed, Dr. Ihekweazu. And at this point, we are concluding this segment of our conversation on Good Morning Nigeria. And first of all, we'd like to thank the man who traveled all the way from Lokoja, the Kogi State capital, to be here with us this morning, Dr. Saka Audu Haruna, Honorable Commissioner for Health, Kogi State. Thank you for being part of our show this morning.
Thank you.
And Dr. Chike Ihekweazu is always with us. Doctor is Director General, National Center for Disease Control. Thank you for coming on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you, Kyria.
Dr. Mrs. Ngige, the Director of Public Health, Minister of Health, thanks for your insight into this edition of the program.
Thank you.
All right, and well, next will be sports now. Super Eagles striker Kelechi Iheanacho is getting back to full fitness after being sidelined with injury. Now, let's join our sports desk for more on sports.